Hello and welcome to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen, and today I've got another book recommendation video for you, and this time I'm recommending books with 200 pages or less. So the first book I want to recommend is Obsession by Liliana Carlisle. So this one is an Omegaverse novel, and Liliana Carlisle mainly writes Omegaverse, and I love the world building that she does in her books. And in this particular series, the American government have decided that when an alpha presents, usually around the age of 18, they are taken away and trained as super soldiers. But these alphas get treated really, really badly. They're kept in isolation on an island and put through all kinds of horrible training techniques and torture to get them fit to be super soldiers. And they're actually keeping them away from their omegas. So this is the world we find ourselves in. And in book one in this series called Possession, this is where things come to a bit of a head. The alphas escape from the island. They're trying to expose the government for basically what they've been doing to them and the lies that they've been telling about alphas and omegas and how they interact with each other, and their alphas are pretty much on the run. Now in this book, in Obsession Book 2, we're following Julian and Audrey, and Audrey is a scientist slash researcher who's been researching omegas and alphas, and she's had some doubts about the research that she's been doing, but it comes to a bit of a head in book 1 when we find out that children are starting to present at a much earlier age, and the government are starting to take children from their families. And at this point, she can't live with her conscience around the research that they're doing, and so she quits her job and resigns and basically goes home. But this kind of is then in tandem with basically what happens in book 1 in terms of the alphas escaping and all the information being leaked to the press, and the public starting to realise that maybe things aren't quite right and starting to question the way they've been living. And she decides that she's going to sneak back to the lab to go and pick up her notes. And when she does that, she goes at night when the place is deserted, she gets away inside the offices and she bumps into Julian, who is an alpha, and he's there to also try and find out some information about the research, because he's part of the team that basically escaped from the island initially and has been leaking this documentation. So this is where they have their meet cute. So Julian and Audrey basically meet at this place. Audrey is really, really scared of him. He realises straight away that she's his omega, but actually she's never presented before. So though she's in her early 20s, she's never presented as an omega, but because she's now been in contact with Julian over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, she starts to basically present as an omega and go into her first heat, and that's where things get spicy between them, because Julian obviously helps her through that. I won't give any more away. It is obviously a very short book at 187 pages, so this, you know, it's very fun, it's action-packed, it's fast-paced. The author does manage to pack a lot into such a short story, and is certainly a great instalment in the series and sets it up for the next book. So the second book that I wanted to recommend today is The Half-Orc Bride by Ruby Dixon, and this one is at 190 pages, and it's one of the longer ones that I'm going to recommend today. This is actually book 3.5 of the Aspect and Anchor series. So in this one we're following Lady Irelanth, and she is a bit of a spinster. So she is a slightly taller, broader, slightly larger heroine than her sisters. Her sisters have all been married off, and she is basically starting to think that no one will want to marry her, and she'll be living with her father, looking after her father for the rest of her life. And she longs to be married and have a family. It's really down to her father to find a suitable match for her, and she's starting to think father's not going to find someone to marry her. But he is short of money, and he decides that he's going to sell her to a half-orc, but she doesn't know this. So basically he tells her, great news, I found someone to marry you, you're going to get a husband, and she's absolutely delighted. And they go on this journey, quite a long journey, to the half-orc's castle, and he is called Agakor. And when she gets there and realises that he is a half-orc, at first she's horrified and a bit upset that her father didn't give her the heads up that he was in fact marrying her off to a half-orc. But Agakor absolutely is besotted with Lady Irelanth right from the first meeting. So this is, I thought this was very sweet and endearing. The hero is a great cinnamon roll of an alpha hero, and when the heroine comes to terms with who he is, finds out a bit more about him, learns what a lovely person he is, and starts to realise that she is indeed attracted to him, she also comes to really be happy about this encounter. I really loved it. Great monster romance, really good short story, really heartwarming characters, fantastic cinnamon roll alpha hero, and a very appreciative heroine who is finally glad to find someone that loves her, is attracted to her, that she's attracted to, and will look after her, and fulfills her dream of becoming a wife and a mother as well. So the next one I'm going to recommend is Sashas Bounty by Deysi O'Donnell. And this is part of an Aliens on Earth anthology that Deysi's done with about 30 other authors. The anthology is due out on the 5th of May. So as this video has gone up, it is now available. You can download the whole anthology and also pick this book up, which is part of that. But I actually read this as an ARC in April. Now, I don't 100% know how many pages it is, but it's definitely less than 200 pages. It only took me a couple of hours to read. And it also fits in with Deysi's Earth's Bounty series. So she's got an Earth's Bounty series. There's 4 books in that series so far. And so this is Sasha's story. So the premise of this one is that there is a group of human women who have been abducted from Earth by human traffickers or alien traffickers who are basically transporting these women to auctions where they're going to be sold off to different aliens and or pleasure houses. So in book 1 of this series, we follow a bounty hunting team who try to prevent the human traffickers from taking these women, and then go basically around trying to track them down. So once they've been sold to the pleasure houses, they try and locate them and rescue them. So this is Sasha's story, and Sasha has indeed been sold at an auction to a group of aliens, but they haven't actually done anything to her yet. She's just captive on board a ship, and they're planning to basically use and abuse her. And this group of aliens that have bought her happen to stop at a a space station, and they go into the pub and have a drink, and they're talking about this human that they've basically managed to win on an auction, and they're kind of bragging about it in the pub, and they're overheard by 2 bounty hunters, Breton and Vrook, and they are actually clones. They look very similar to each other, and they overheard this conversation. They decide they're going to rescue her and basically try and get her home. But of course, once they actually rescue her, maybe they're not so willing to take her back to Earth. All of Deysi O'Donnell's books are fast-paced, super fun, spicy, and I would highly recommend. Right, so the next one I want to recommend is Alpha Ranger by Anna Fury, and this one is 45 pages, and it's an Alpha Compound short. So I've put this one in because I highly recommend Anna Fury as an author. She is a relatively new author, but she's actually quite prolific. She writes very quickly, and she's put out quite a few books now. But I actually discovered her from her very first book, and I've been following her ever since and reading all her books. And the very first book that she wrote was The Alpha Awakens, and it was part of the Alpha Compound series. And this is where we start to learn about her Omegaverse and how this world works. And basically in her world, alphas have transitioned because of a virus. So men are contracting a virus, and it can turn them into alphas, where they become much bigger and faster and stronger and more violent than their human counterparts. And because of a wildling phase that they go through in the first couple of weeks of transition, where they are a little bit can get out of hand, quite violent and a little bit scary, the government have started to round them up. But there are also lots of alphas that have kind of escaped and lived in alpha compounds or communities, and they are basically trying to, gather in groups, make themselves safe and make themselves heard and basically accepted as part of the community at large. So much more to it than that. I highly recommend her whole books, But I've put this one in here because, like I say, it is an alpha compound short. It's just 45 pages, and it is just a very short love story with Liv and Thatcher. Now, Thatcher is a alpha, but he's a ranger in their local kind of national park. It's a very small village, kind of out of the way, and Liv has had a bit of a crush on Thatcher for many years, and she works at the local pharmacy, and he is also very attracted to Liv, and he keeps going back to the pharmacy to pick up medication that he no longer needs because he's an alpha, so he doesn't actually need the medication, but he wants an excuse to go and see her. Now, one day she's decided she's had enough of waiting around. She can't understand why he you know, is not asking her out on a date, so she decides to bake some cookies and take them to his house. And of course, on the way there, there's a big snowstorm. They get snowed in at the cabin. One thing leads to another, and they find out that they've been pining after each other for quite a few years. So like I said, this one is 45 pages. It doesn't take very long to read at all. So it is very fast paced. There's not much to the story, but a very fun, romantic, spicy read. So then I've got another Omegaverse for you, and I'm sorry about this. When I was putting this list together, I didn't realise how many Omegaverse I'd actually got in here. And that's no different from this one that I want to recommend, which is Samson by Callie Rhodes. And it's book 3 in her Boundary Lands Omegaverse series. Now, I tore through Callie Rhodes's series for this. I kind of... at some point at the end of 2021 and into 2022, I really got a taste for Omegaverse, started to read quite a lot of Omegaverse, and I discovered Callie Rhodes and kind of pretty much binged through her entire series. I think, again, her world building is really interesting. It's a really good take on the alphas and the Omegas and how it all works, and her heroes are obviously all alpha heroes because they are alphas, but you know, they're also cinnamon rolls as well. So absolutely fantastic, love this one. So what's this one about? So in this one we're following Samson, who is in fact an alpha. He is living in the Boundary Lands, so basically the alphas, there's not very many of them in society, but the alphas are kind of shunned by normal communities and tend to live apart from, you know, larger towns and cities. And mostly they are contained to the Boundary Lands. Now, women in particular don't go into the Boundary Lands unless they've got a bit of a death wish, because they don't present as Omegas unless they're in close proximity to an alpha. So females don't tend to go there unless they absolutely have to, because once they go there, if they do have the Omega gene, they're close to an alpha, they become an Omega, then they are likely to never leave the Boundary Lands again. But in this one, our heroine is Callie, and she is in fact a beta. She's an absolute beta. She's been fully tested and she's been near alphas and she's never transitioned. So she's also a researcher. So we have research groups that go into the Boundary Lands to research the alphas, find out more about them, find out how they are transitioned, how they live, what makes them tick, and also then how they interact with the Omegas and how that coupling sort of works. And she's a researcher. She's been around a while and she's very much trusted by the alphas in that community. And Samson's had his eye on her for a while, and he finally gets his opportunity to make his claim. What I really like about this one, and the reason I put it in here as book 3, because I could have recommended any books in this series to be honest, is the fact that Callie is in fact a beta. She remains a beta, nothing magical happens, that unexpectedly she finds out she's an Omega and she transitions. She is actually a beta, so it explores the relationship and what it means for an alpha to be with a beta, how they can be together, and how they're going to make it work as a couple. So if you do like Omegaverse or you want something a bit different, then I recommend Callie Rhodes' series. And like I say, Samson is a good one. Right, so now onto something a bit different, and I've got a historical romance for you. This one's The Devil's Submission by Nicola Davidson, and this one is just 104 pages. And it's book 2 in her Fallen series. There's 3 books in this series, and they're all revolve around a pleasure club that are owned by 3 gentlemen. This one, we're following Lord Grayson Devilrow, and he is the sort of accountant behind the business. He very much keeps his head in the books. But he's got a secret, and his secret is that he likes a touch of pain with his pleasure, but he also wants to be dominated by a woman. So he met Eliza, and she was a fiery spitfire of a woman, and he hoped that she would be the type of woman that would be able to give him instructions in the bedroom and not back down and give him what he needed. And so they had a bit of a whirlwind romance, and they got married. She was basically told by her mother that she needed to tone down her fiery confrontational ways and be more demure and submissive towards her husband. She becomes much more subservient, much more demure, much more ladylike with Lord Grayson, and this puts a wedge between them, and eventually she is kind of sent away to the countryside. But something brings her back to London, brings her back into his life. They finally get a chance to talk and resolve some of their issues. So again, it's a very fun, fast read. It's a great second chance romance with, you know, a struggling marriage, and where two people finally get to communicate and tell each other what they want, and they get their happy ever after. So would highly recommend. The series as a whole is really good as well, but that was my favourite of the three. Now the next one that I'm going to recommend is a bit of a cheat, and it's The Risk by S.T. Abbey. And the reason it's a bit of a cheat is because The Risk is part one. The series itself is a Mindfuck series. It's actually in 5 parts. However, I'm still going to count it because you can buy it as one whole book, so you buy all 5 parts together, so obviously that takes you well over 200 pages. The first part is only 132 pages though, and you can actually download them and read them in instalments, so you can read all 5 parts separately. And I like this because you can read part 1, see if it's for you. If it's not, absolutely fine, move on. If you love it, you can make your way through, and you get that extra sense of satisfaction because you can count this one as 5 books rather than 1 book, and you can get more ticked off your goals for the year. So I thoroughly enjoyed the Mindfuck series. It was fascinating and brilliant, a little bit unhinged in parts, but essentially we're following Lana. Now Lana is a serial killer, but she's seeking revenge for something very, very terrible that had happened to her about a decade before. And Logan is an FBI agent who's a profiler, and he is on the serial killer's case, and he's trying to track the serial killer down. And Lana happens to meet Logan in a bar one night, and they have instant chemistry and connection, and they start a relationship. And when Lana finds out that Logan's actually the FBI officer trying to, you know, that's covering her case essentially, she knows that she should stay away, but she can't because she really likes this guy. There is also another serial killer that's out there doing bad things, and Lana uses the information she knows as being a serial killer herself to help Logan with his case. So I just thought the whole thing was super interesting, really kept you guessing, kept you thinking, but it's also, you know, a little bit violent, a little bit sexy. So all of the elements that I love. So we've got mystery, spice, and good times in 5 short installments, which was perfection. So then the next one I want to recommend is Hefty by Jessa Kane, and this is just 62 pages, so again a short story really. Now last year I got myself into a bit of a reading slump, and I struggled for quite a while to read anything or stick with anything, until I was watching a YouTube video, and I can't remember who recommended it, but they basically recommended Jessa Kane as a short story writer, and so I looked them up, and I then started to read Jessa Kane's. And what I really liked about this, I literally read maybe 12 or 15 books just in one weekend, because, you know, I pick one up, read it in an hour, then move on to another one, then move on to another one. And again, I felt a real sense of satisfaction that I'd read all of these stories, even though they're only short. But Hefty stuck with me. I really enjoyed this one and would highly recommend. And I don't know if it was a bit of a throwback to my childhood and the types of books I used to read. So I used to love Sweet Dreams. It was a series of young adult romance novels set in American high schools with American football players and cheerleaders, and it made me really wish that I'd grown up in America and had that high school experience. And this one was a bit of a throwback to that, I think, because in this one we're following Zach, and he is a hefty offensive lineman for a football team at his high school, and he's in love with one of the cheerleaders. Now the cheerleader is Jill, and he thinks she's absolutely out of his league. She's gorgeous and perfect and popular, and in addition to that, she's also his sister's best friend, so it's a little bit taboo in that sense as well. So he thinks he's got no chance with her. But Jill has obviously been around Zach quite a lot growing up, because, you know, he is her best friend's brother, and she has always secretly had a crush on him. He is a bigger guy though, so he's described in this book as quite hefty and also quite hairy, so not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but Jill thinks he's absolutely amazing and is very attracted to him. They are both virgins in this book. Obviously they're only in high school, and Jill decides to ask him if he will help her explore basically sex and intimacy, because she really trusts him and she would like her first experience to be with him. And of course he absolutely takes her up on her offer. Like I say, it's a really short book. You can tell by my smile, I really liked it. I absolutely love the hero in this one. I think it was because he was so vulnerable and insecure about his body image, and it was a really nice change to see that from a man rather than as we normally see it from the eyes of the female character. So then I've got Grimm by Measha Stone, and this one's 119 pages, and this is the prequel to her Ever After series, which is based on fairy tale retellings. And in this one we have Daniela and William Grimm. So he's basically the Grimm, and his name is William. Now Daniela's roommate has got herself involved with some bad people and has stolen money from the local mafia, and they have gone to the apartment to get the money back. Her friend's disappeared though with her boyfriend, and Danielle is basically alone in the apartment when these mafia people turn up, and they decide they're going to take her as payment to get the money back that her best friend, so her roommate and her boyfriend, took from the mafia. And they're thinking that they're going to sell her to the local pleasure house, which is owned by the guy from, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, I think it's Ash or something like that, who is the Beast from the first novel, Beast. And he basically owns this kind of pleasure house, sex club, where he employs women basically and contracts them out to men to obviously service their sexual needs and stuff like that. And so this mafia group is hoping to sell Daniela to him. He basically says, no, I don't. Clearly she's not here of her own free will, and I don't employ or buy women who are not here by choice. But who also happens to be there at the time is William Grimm, and he realises that if Ash doesn't take her, then the mafia guys are going to take her somewhere else, and something even worse is going to happen to her. So he offers to buy her, and then their story goes from there. And then the last book I've got to recommend to you today is Hold by Claire Kent, and this one's 180 pages. And this is book one of the Hold series. I just think it's a really interesting concept and reminded me very much of Pitch Black or The Chronicles of Riddick with Vin Diesel, because what we've got here is planets that send their prisoners to prison planets. So if somebody has done something wrong and it meets a certain criteria, the individual will be punished by being placed onto a prison planet and kind of like left there. Like most people, once they're put into these prison planets, they're never coming out, they're never escaping, they're kind of forgotten about and left. And unfortunately our heroine is one such person who has been sentenced to be left on a prison planet. And before she is put onto the planet, the guard basically gives her one piece of advice before he drops her in, and he basically says, find the strongest man in there and stick with him. And she very much believes that Kane is her best chance to stay alive. Now, very much like in you know, Chronicles of Riddick, when we see the prison system and what it's like in there, these people have to fend for themselves. They very much have to fight over resources and food. And if there's any women in there, obviously the women are used and abused by the men, unless they can latch on to a strong man who's going to protect her, make sure she's fed and kept away from all of the other men. And she gets her eyes on Kane, but he does look particularly big and bad to her, and he's also got his own like room that has a lock on it, so that's also quite valuable in that prison as well. So I highly recommend this one. Claire Kent has done some brilliant romance stories. The whole series as a whole is really good. They're all very different and unique, and she's just very talented at making you believe that these two people are falling in love in just 180 pages. So I would highly recommend that book, but also any other books written by Claire Kent as well. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's all the recommendations I've got today. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. If you've got any short stories or novellas that you would like to recommend, please put those in the comments down below. And as always, please subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more content from me. So thank you for making it to the end, and I hope to see you next time. Bye! And Daniela is literally left holding, I don't know, what's the expression? Holding the monkey. Basically Daniela, I don't know, holding the monkey. Now, he met Lady Eliza Devereux, and she was Now, he met Lady Eliza Devereux, and she, oh, I'll say Lady Eliza, so, don't know if you put that in, don't know if you want it in there. I feel like I don't have the words today. It's gonna be so hard in the editing process, but maybe I can pull something together out of that. But anyway, in this one, Liliana Carlisle mainly writes. I don't know what's wrong with my teeth today, but I really. I'm all over the place with this today, aren't I? I'm not making it easy to edit myself. This neckline's going to really irritate me this one because it keeps dropping. I've got a little taggy bit on my nail as well that I keep catching. Not good. Okay.